thanks for being here. This grew out of a number of conversations we had with our advisory board, and that has been the case that we have these amazing alum, great supporters of KU engineering who are out there working. Some have since retired, but they have a great deal to share. Their career trajectory and what they've learned, and what does it take to teach our students soft skills, professional skills, leadership skills, or what we decided was to call it, what does it take to accelerate your career? So companies want this, our alum want to help, and students are hungry to hear from our sort of successful graduates. So that's how this started. This is the second one in the series, and I'll pass it on to Bob, a professor in civil engineering working on geotech, to introduce our distinguished speaker, Pat Oenbring. So go ahead, Bob.
All right, thank you, Arvid. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Pat Oenbring to be our second speaker in our inaugural series of the Career Accelerator Lecture Series, sponsored by the Advisory Board for the School of Engineering. Pat served as chairman and CEO of private equity-backed and Denver-based Hawkwood Energy, LLC, since he co-founded the company in 2012. In June 2020, he retired as CEO and now serves as chairman of the board of Hawkwood Energy. Since its founding in 2012, the company has grown to 70 employees and annual revenue of $300 to $400 million. Mr. Oenbring has more than 45 years of oil and gas industry experience, primarily with Conoco, Occidental Petroleum, Harvest Natural Resources, and Hawkwood. Through the course of his career, he has worked in project management, production, business development, operations, and executive management positions in the United States, Canada, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa, including roles as president and general manager of Occidental Qatar, president and general manager of Occidental Permian Basin, and vice president of Western operations for Harvest Natural Resources. Mr. Oenbring has a BS in chemical engineering from the University of Kansas. And he's going to be speaking on teamwork today. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Pat.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you, Arvin. It's my pleasure to participate in the Career Accelerator Lecture Series. I suspect many of you heard Rich Smith a couple of weeks ago on leadership. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to catch that session. Rich did a great job. It's a great kickoff for the program. It's my topic today will be teamwork, collaboration, and communication, which are all related and important soft skills in the conduct of an engineering career, as Arvin mentioned earlier. I want to add a little bit to my introduction to give you a little perspective on me. First of all, I give all of you students a lot of credit for what I think is a really good career choice. I owe a lot to my career choice as an engineer at the University of Kansas. I grew up on a farm, went to a tiny Kansas high school, which is remarkably still alive, and came to KU totally unprepared, both technically and from the standpoint of knowing what I wanted to do. Once I stumbled into the School of Engineering, it opened my eyes to the possibilities. And as a result, I've been able to work on a lot of interesting things over the years. I've been able to live and learn about a lot of places, and that's been really good for myself and for my family. I've gotten the opportunity to make meaningful contributions of things that people improve the quality of life of people. I've made a lot of great friends, primarily working on teams in the course of that career, and made a good enough living to put my kids through college. So it's a lot of good things about a engineering career. I think you made a wise choice. I encourage you to stick with it. As Bob said at the beginning, if you have questions on the presentation or really anything, I'll try my best to answer those at the end. Please use the chat line to submit those questions, and we'll deal with them as we go. Now, my primary topic, as you know, is teamwork. Teamwork's motherhood and apple pie. Who can argue with the need for being a good team player? So I'm not going to spend my time today trying to sell you on being a team player. Rather, I hope to give you some information on the practical aspects of teamwork in an engineering career. And I'll talk about some positives and some negatives, and some of the aspects that you'll face as you embark upon an engineering career. One other introductory comment before I get into this is I suspect some of the people on the call are extroverted people who naturally enjoy working in groups. Teamwork's probably natural to you. You probably like to do homework with your friends, do projects with your colleagues. Others of you, however, are probably more like me, more of an introverted person. I can tell you when I was at KU, I preferred to just get my assignments, work on them by myself, and only touch base with others when necessary. But when I went to work, I found out that that model wasn't going to work, that I quickly realized that I was going to be working with others in teams all the time. So I had to make the necessary adjustments to my work style to increase my work effectiveness. I think I learned how to do that and learned the value of being a team player in the workplace, while still retaining the ability to retreat to my office sometimes to do private time work when it was appropriate. So the bottom line is that I learned how to enjoy working in teams, and some of the best friends that I've made and the most lasting friends that I've made in the industry are those that I derive from working on teams with those people. Let's see here. All right. So these are the things that I hope I'm going to emphasize, and I hope to communicate with you today. And I hope you take away some of these things. So listen for some of these items, if you would. First of all, I'm going to talk about why is engineering teamwork so important. Provide some input on what defines a good team player. How to select the appropriate members for a team, which is really critical. Having the right players on any team is extremely important. I'm going to show you some examples that I've seen of good and bad team behaviors, and then spend some time talking about communication, the importance of good proactive communication, and the importance of using the appropriate communication channels as you do communicate within a team. And finally, how being good at teamwork can accelerate your career. You'll note that I've dedicated a fair amount of time specifically to talking about communications. I believe that being a good communicator is probably the one single most critical skill that you will need to have to be an effective team player in an engineering environment. And as a side note, there's been considerable organizational research done that verifies that employee satisfaction and morale in any organization is most directly correlatable with the employee's perceived level of communication within that organization. Communication in all directions, up, down, and sideways. Point being that if employees perceive that the organization has a high level of communication, they're more likely to be happy and satisfied in that role than if they perceive the communication to be poor. So communication is an important topic, and I'll spend a little time on it. What's a team? Well, we all probably have a pretty good idea, a general idea at least, of what a team is. But I thought I should start out this presentation with at least a little bit of groundwork and a definition. So I Googled around a little bit. I wasn't specifically looking for a KU-oriented definition, but I stumbled upon this one that was developed by a KU community health group a few years ago. Thought it was really good. And they define a team as a group of people with a commitment to one another, to the team, to a common goal, to a common vision, and to a high level of achievement. Thought it was well stated. An important point that's made there is that the commitment is not just to the work, but also to the other people on the team. And that's an important part of being a good team player, is keeping that in mind. So I told you I wasn't going to try to sell you on teamwork, and I'm not, but I do want to mention a few of the items on this slide, which are advantages of working on teams. Teamwork's not just an altruistic virtue where you make it to heaven if you do it. It also results in concrete advantages for the work group and for the individuals in the work group. Here again, I have to acknowledge that I lifted a good part of this slide from that same KU community health presentation I mentioned to before. I added to it a little bit. I want to hit a few of these items that I've highlighted just to help you think about them. First of all, being on a team broadens what individuals can do. You can do bigger things, more impactful things, and feel a part of being something bigger when you're on a team. Secondly, being a part of a successful team and successful teamwork is very fulfilling. I can say that from personal experience, and there's lots of research that documents that. Thirdly, the shared vision that goes with a team is very important. It keeps people working, not only working consistently, but working toward in a coordinated fashion, much better than people if they're working individually in a disjointed fashion. So the benefit of a shared vision is definitely there. I alluded to the relationships earlier, but being a part of a good working team is a great way to build long-lasting relationships. It certainly happened for me. Some of my very best and longest-lasting friends have come from the teams that I worked on. Another really important aspect to you individually of being on a team is learning new skills from your colleagues on a team. And particularly where you're on a multidiscipline team, which happens quite often in the engineering world, gives you the opportunity to work with people that have different training and different skills than you. If you make the effort to pick up on those skills from working with those people, it can really broaden your capabilities. I can say certainly in my case, I started out as a process engineer, chemical engineering degree. Working on project teams, I made the effort to learn about electrical and piping and mechanical and instrumentation from the people I was working with. As a result of that, I gravitated to project management, which was kind of the first management type position that I had, and that was the springboard of my career. So learning from the people I worked with in teams was a really important part of my career progression. And finally, the bottom of the page there, good teams can build leaders and help team members' careers. As I mentioned, most companies in an engineering context, people that become project leaders, team leaders, are people that have a great opportunity to progress to more management level positions in the company if that's what they choose to do. That's what happened to me, and I'm not unusual in that regard. So this slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between teamwork and collaboration. These two words are sometimes used interchangeably, but they're really not the same thing. Collaboration is work done collectively by a group of people. Teamwork is more broad. It can incorporate collaboration, but it can also combine collaborative work with individual work into a useful and bigger accomplishment. Some examples of collaboration, I tried to catch a few on this slide. One of them is brainstorming sessions. Brainstorming sessions, in my definition, is when people sit down and try to come up with solutions and ideas for solutions to problems or designs where there isn't an obvious answer. It's a great way to get ideas on the table, and with a good working brainstorming group, you can synthesize those ideas into something useful. It's work that happens as a group of people work together. Similarly, reviewing partially completed or completed work and discussing that with a group of people to finalize that work's another good example of collaborative work. There are many available digital tools, the Zooms, Microsoft Teams, and probably more that I'm not as conversant with to facilitate collaboration. There's also simply sitting down 6 feet apart, of course, and working together in a room with a flip chart or a whiteboard to get ideas down. So the point I want to make on this slide is think of collaboration as one tool that teams can use to accomplish their work, but it's not the only tool. And also, some work items lend themselves to group collaborative work and some don't. In my opinion, at least, there are some elements of work that are best completed by individuals going back into their office or their workspace, doing some individual work and then reviewing it with the team rather than working it as a group. Other items are better worked as a group. The remainder of my presentation is going to focus on teamwork, but I would ask you to remember that collaboration is definitely part of the teamwork equation, and when used appropriately can be a really valuable part. So there's many different types of teams with different goals and work tasks. And some teams are long-standing, I should say, teams. Some are part-time teams that are put together to work a specific problem. Some of them last a long time. Some are only there for a short time. There are many examples. I tried to catch a few of them here. Obviously, our Jayhawks are one of them. But there are design teams, there are project teams, product teams, there are special workflow teams, as I mentioned here, to address topics such as diversity, environmental initiatives, etc. There are investigative teams if there's a natural disaster or an accident in a industrial facility, put together a group of people to look at that. There are problem-solving teams. There are teams to brainstorm the next generation of products. Teams can go anywhere in terms of their function, but the fundamental principles of effective teamwork apply equally across all these kind of teams. And the other important takeaway I would encourage you to get from this slide is that most of your work in your engineering career will be performed in teams of one type or another. It certainly was the case for me, and I think it's the case for most engineers. So it just accentuates the importance of learning to work effectively within teams. Most of your work's going to ultimately be done in that context of working in teams. Picking the right team members. I'm going to use a hoops analogy here to demonstrate the principles of selecting and staffing a team. I can't underestimate how important it is to make wise selections of people that staff the team. The degree of success of any team is heavily dependent on having the right team members. So it's worth whatever time it takes to appropriately staff the team at the beginning. Said in a basketball context, you don't win games if you don't have the best players on the court. I will say that when you start out in your career, sometimes you'll get a chance to influence team selection, sometimes you won't. There'll be cases, I'm sure, where you'll be assigned to a team with some other folks and told by the whatever boss assigned you to the team to just get after it and do your work. But often you will have a chance to have input on team member selection. And your perspective can be really valuable to your boss or to the person who's selecting the team. Managers don't always see and know as much about individual worker performance as peers of that worker might do because they work with that person on a day-by-day basis. So my encouragement here is if you have the opportunity to provide input to influence selection of the team when the team's being put together, take that opportunity. It's a great way to improve the ultimate outcome from the team. Now, I did want to hit a few characteristics to be considered when picking a team here. First of all, you've got to have the right skills. You've got to have the right technical skills. The basketball analogy is you've got to have Division I skills and potential on the team. You can't put a high school team on the court and expect to compete in the Big 12. Diversity, having members of the team that have different skills, viewpoints, background, ideas, and experience is very important. It allows better synergy among the team members to come up with good solutions that consider all the aspects. Similarly, on a basketball team, you've got to have the point guard. You need somebody to defend the rim. You need some shooters. You need defensive specialists. Picking team members that are team players is very important. You have to have people who can work together effectively to do their jobs and who define their success in terms of the team, not in their own individual statistics or not in their own individual piece of work, but rather in the success of the team. That's certainly the case in basketball. The team players have to be coachable, willing to play the role that's needed on the team, and care more about the team's record than their individual stats. You need depth on a team. Depth means people who can back up other members and play multiple roles on the team. That's obvious in basketball, but it's just the same in the engineering workplace. And finally, formal or informal leadership, and that can rotate. You may or may not be the designated team leader on a team, but that there's still an opportunity for you to provide leadership. If you see the team struggling with something or getting hung up with something or needing something from other people, other groups, you can be the one to step forward to push the team to do that. The analogy in basketball is that Coach Self can't do it all. He relies on usually the senior members of the team to pull the team together at critical moments in the game. You'll see them gather at the foul line when things are getting rough, and the team leader gets them together and gets the team back on pulling in the same direction. Similarly, we don't see it on TV, but in practice, those informal leaders ensure the accountability that of all the players at practice, that they ensure everybody's working hard and that they're putting in the effort to improve the team the way they need to improve. So picking the right team members is very critical. Take the time and use whatever opportunities you get to influence that. I'm going to spend a little time on what I think the skills are for making a good team member. I won't hit all of these, but I'll hit some of them. Some of these are probably obvious to you. Others may not be quite as obvious. I'm going to start with sense of humor and a proactive, good communicator. Having a sense of humor is really important. When you're on a team, stuff happens. I'll use the polite term. And changes occur, and things don't work the way they're supposed to work sometimes. And you've got to be able to have a sense of humor about that, be flexible, that's another one, react to those changes and move forward. It's very important. A proactive, good communicator, I'll probably overuse the word proactive in this presentation, but being proactive about communicating, meaning reaching out to people and keeping people informed, is really, really important. Being a good listener is important. And by being a good listener, I mean truly listening to people when they talk for understanding. And that a good way to check yourself if you're listening in a good way is if someone is talking to you about something, if you're thinking, if you're in your mind, you're thinking that how am I going to respond to this, then you're not fully listening. If you're thinking in your mind, how do I ensure I understand this completely, then that's the active listening. So being a good listener is important. As I mentioned, flexibility is important. Being respectful and humble is important. Part of being a good team member is developing relationships with the other team members. The team will only function at its highest level if and only if there's good relationships among the team members. So those characteristics of being respectful and humble facilitate those relationships. Commitment to team performance and success, I mentioned that earlier. You want to gauge your performance success in terms of how the team goes, not individually. Accountability for work, meeting individual work responsibilities and deadlines. I'm really a big advocate on this one. When you work on a team, everyone on the team has some individual work responsibilities and deadlines. If you don't meet your responsibilities or your deadlines, you impact everybody else that was waiting on incorporating that work. And you diminish the performance of the team, you diminish your relationships with your team members. So accepting that accountability, meeting those timelines, if you're having difficulty doing it, bringing the rest of the team to that awareness is really, really an important part of being a good team member, probably the most important part. That next one about the ability to constructively question and challenge other team members is also important. You're obviously going to have cases where you want to ask questions, you think somebody's answer doesn't make sense, but how you raise those questions and do it in a manner that's professional and retains the relationships with the other members on the team is absolutely critical to the team going forward. You can't just be in a position undermining somebody or publicly criticizing somebody. You have to be able to get to the heart of the issues, but do it in a way that is constructive and doesn't damage relationships. Bottom of the page, being a problem solver. When the problem comes up, jump in there and look for how that problem is going to be solved. Always willing to help goes with that. And lastly, recognizing when you're wrong, and we're all wrong sometimes. We accept that responsibility, acknowledge that it was our mistake, and then back off and move forward. You never want to be in a situation of trying to blame somebody else or trying to pass off the blame or cover it up in some fashion. It's much better to just recognize when you make a mistake, acknowledge the mistake, and then move forward. You'll gain the respect of your team members, and the team will work together more effectively and get back on track more quickly if you do that. So here's some examples of good team behaviors that I've observed over my career. First one's important, and that's when you're planning the work of the team, it needs to be a work product of the whole team that everyone is bought into. It might be tempting to have 2 or 3 people make the work plan and tell everybody else, but that's not good enough. The whole team needs to be bought into what the plan is, and the plan means what everybody has to do and when. And equally important is somebody has to write it down. It needs to be written down on a piece of paper and distributed to the full team so that there's no question about what the team's individual responsibilities are and what the targets are. A second one of good team behavior is identifying situations where you see one of your teammates struggling. Maybe they're behind, or maybe they don't know what to do, and reaching out to them, but doing it privately, not to hang them out, but doing it behind the scenes, asking them some questions, determining helping them determine if they're having trouble, and then helping them. If you do that, you'll build those strong relationships on the team and also improve the team's performance. Third item there, stepping up to cover for a teammate when necessary. Things happen, people get sick, family issues, any kind of circumstances can impact one team member's ability to do their work. A good teammate steps up and helps them out. And people remember that. They'll help you out the next time when the shoe's on the other foot. I talked about the next one earlier, that avoiding last-minute delivery of work product. When your work is being relied on by other people to do their job, it's really important that you deliver it completely and timely so that they have the opportunity to do their work. There's nothing that irritates people more than getting something dropped on their desk at the last minute and putting them in a time bind to complete their work. And related to that is providing your team members the opportunity to review your work and input it as you're doing it. If you're doing something, again, that people are going to be using, even if it's not a finished product, set up an opportunity to sit with them, go through the work so they know what's coming, and they may have some ideas about how to improve your work before you just deliver it to them for them to work on it. So it's a little extra effort on your part, but it's absolutely worth it. Bottom part of the page, if you are experiencing delays, and stuff does happen, informing the team members as early as possible that there are issues or delays in your work. Don't put it off till the due date. Let people know that there are issues, and usually the team can work around that, find ways to help you if you need it, or rejigger the work plan to be able to accommodate that. But it's really important that you don't keep that to yourself, but make clear that when an issue is starting to materialize. If something goes wrong, publicly take responsibility. I said this earlier, but there's no better way to build strong relationships on a team than if you clearly take responsibility when something that you're responsible for didn't go like it was supposed to. People respect that, and you'll see the same kind of copycat behavior from other people if you do it. And finally, and this is an easy one to forget, is you got to celebrate when you do accomplish things on a team. And it can be small things or you have a big party when the project's over, but even along the way, you get a certain big milestone met. Celebrating that in some small way, however you want to do it, is a great way to cement the relationships on that team. I don't like to focus on negatives, but I've seen a lot of poor team behaviors over the years. And so I want to talk about a few of them. And just to be clear, I didn't make any of these up. I've seen all these. And these kind of behaviors can slow down the work of the team. They can damage the working relationships on the team. They can damage the credibility of the team in the eyes of the broader organization. And they generally can contribute to poor team performance. I'm going to hit a few of these. The first one is team leaders or team members taking credit for other people's work without acknowledging it. And so I've seen that done blatantly, where people take work and don't mention that it came from somebody else, or subtly. Subtly means incorporating someone else's work into yours and not acknowledging that. It's a really great way to destroy relationships with individuals if you use their work and don't give them the credit for it. If you're having interpersonal relationship issues with somebody, if there's some issues between you and another person for some reason, you just cannot let that interfere with team progress. If you have a situation like that, it's imperative that you make the effort with that person that you have a problem with to at least define some boundaries for how you're going to work on the team, so you're not going to impede the team's progress because of issues between two people. I've talked about number 3, the team members not delivering work products on time and impacting everyone else. Number 4 is one that may not be obvious, but it's an important one. And that's team members being reluctant to ask questions and clarify responsibilities as the team makes plans. It's very likely that if you have uncertainty in your mind, if it's gray in your mind as to what your responsibilities are on a team, that other members of the team have the same gray in their mind. So you really owe it to yourself and the team members to keep asking questions until all that gray gets resolved and people know very exactly what they need to do next and when. If you don't do that, people sometimes are reluctant because they feel like they're exposing their ignorance or they're making life difficult for the rest of the team. It's not the case. It's just simply a matter of asking those questions and resolving those points early on, and then the team will work effectively. The next one is one I've also seen, and that's where mostly team leaders, but other members take work from a team member and then unilaterally modify the work without going back to the person that did it. What that implies is that the team leader, let's say the team leader, thinks they know better how to do that person's work than the person doing it, him or herself. And this can be something as simple as changing up PowerPoint slides or a spreadsheet, or it could be something more fundamental. If you're a team leader or member and you don't agree with something that came from somebody else, you have to go back to that person and work it. You can't just change it. How would you feel if somebody changes your work and doesn't give you the opportunity to be part of that change? Another poor team behavior is throwing other team members under the bus when things go sideways. If something bad happens on the team, if there's a team failure, the team has to own it. If there was an individual in the team that caused the problem, the team can solve that as a team, but not publicly. And again, this comes back to taking accountability. You take responsibility yourself when things go bad. You don't throw your other team members under the bus. And finally, one of the downsides of team behavior is that it can take a long time to make decisions. You have a lot of people involved. You want to try to reach consensus and get everybody to agree. You work that. At some point, though, if you can't get people to 100% consensus on things, leadership has to step up and find an 80% solution and move forward. So you really have to be cognizant of the fact that you can't spend too much time making team decisions trying to get to consensus. You should try, but at some point you have to keep it going, keep the project going, keep the work going, and make a decent decision, get everybody on board to follow it. I'm guessing that many of you are ambitious, competitive people who strive to be the best. It's a common characteristic of KU engineers. You've likely been a top performer in school, and you likely want to continue to be recognized and hopefully compensated as a top performer when you get into the workplace. So the headline of this slide might be going through some of your minds. Most of you probably wouldn't say it out loud for fear of being perceived as a jerk, but I'm guessing that some of you may be thinking of it. And just in true confessions, I can tell you that I had these thoughts in my head when I started work. I'm a competitive person too, and I wanted to rise to the top. And I asked myself, speaking honestly, whether working on teams was going to hinder my progression in some manner. Well, I learned pretty quickly that being on teams and working on teams actually helped my progression instead of hindering it. The things I learned are the things I put in white on this slide. All the individuals on a team benefit from being part of a successful team. Management will notice a common thread. If you're on teams that are always successful, they'll figure out why that's happening. People who perform well in teams naturally gravitate to those team leader roles that I've talked about earlier, which results in recognition. And to the extent you get positive feedback from your peers on the team, and that gets communicated to management, and that happens, that is probably the most powerful career boost that you can get. That means that people that you're working with recognize what you do to the degree that they say something to management about it. When that happens, it's a big career boost. I mentioned this earlier, but participation in multidisciplinary teams is a great way to add breadth of experience to your resume and prepare you for progression. And leading progressively more impactful and important teams in an organization is a very clear path to career progression. So bottom line, increasing your role and contributions on work teams is the fastest way to individual recognition in an organization, especially when you start getting the formal roles. So being good on teams helps you to achieve those high goals, doesn't hinder you. Over the course of my career, I participated in several training exercises where we participants were asked to identify their career bests. And career bests are defined as work items during your career where you felt the best about your work, where you felt the greatest sense of accomplishment, where you felt the greatest sense of fulfillment from your work. And I personally have been fortunate to have a lot of fulfilling experiences over a long career. And I've noted 4 of them here that always bubble to the top of my list when I'm asked to do this type of exercise. I'm not going through these things, but I will say that the common thread in all of these career bests is that they were all team endeavors and they were all difficult things. In some of the cases, there were naysayers who said the undertaking either wasn't logistically possible or didn't make economic sense or would never work. And I can tell you it was a really great feeling in all these cases to overcome these difficulties, prove people wrong, the naysayers wrong, and accomplish something that added value to the company I was working for and contributed to society. And, I'm proud of my individual accomplishments over my career, but I can tell you that I'm most proud of being part of these teams and the accomplishments of these teams. I'm getting close to wrapping up here. I'm going to turn to talking about communication a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, communication is critical to employee satisfaction. On this slide, I've tried to contrast some good and poor team communication behaviors that I've observed over my career. Good communication as a team member for proactivity is probably one of the most, and making the effort to inform your teammates and keep them informed. If you're proactive about your communication, others tend to be proactive with you. And the best way, in my mind, to define proactivity is to try to put yourself in your other teammates' shoes. What would, if you were one of your teammates, what would you like to know about what you are doing that will influence your work? If you can put your mind in that spot and identify that information that other people need to know or want to know and give it to them in a timely fashion, that's proactive communication. And reciprocation will occur if you do it. When in doubt, over communicate. There may be times when you're thinking, I'm putting too much effort into communicating, or I'm telling people more than they really need to know. I'd encourage you not to think that way. It's almost impossible to over communicate. Clarity and completeness of communication is especially important in teams. And this sort of ties back to the comments I made about asking questions of clarification. When you communicate with people, it's very important that you ensure that your communication is clear and complete and leaves as little gray as possible. In a team environment, where people are relying on the work from other people to be able to do their work, that clarity and completeness is doubly important. And related to that is timeliness. The communicate information to team members as soon as you have it. If it comes later, it can negatively influence the teammates' ability to get their work accomplished. Some poor communication behavior examples, the biggest one I could come up with was clicks. And I've seen this, and that's communication within teams that exclude some members. There's no reason for that. A team is a team, and the communication needs to be consistent within the team and not limited to subsets within the team. The next one is a lack of clarity, and this is something a mistake I made along the way. When communicating, you need to be really clear about whether you're communicating brainstorming ideas, or whether you're speculating, or whether you're communicating facts or results. As I began, I'll get my personal examples, as I began to get into management, my style, thing I like to do is throw out half-baked ideas when I'm thinking about solving a problem and get feedback from people on whether that makes any sense or how we should improve on that idea. When I started getting into management positions, I found that if I threw that out in an email, rather than people taking it as ideas, people would run and start doing it and taking it as instruction. Well, obviously, I learned to make it very clear when I communicated to people that these are ideas. I'm looking for input. Please don't run off and do this until we talk about it. But the point is that as you put information out there, you need to put clear context around it to describe what it is. Failing to honor team boundaries, that's another important one. The quickest way to destroy the team dynamics is to communicate information outside the team before the team itself is fully on board with that information. So when you're coming to resolution on something, it's important to get the team fully up to speed and everyone on the team in agreement with what the message is, and then communicate beyond the team boundaries in the broader organization. If you don't do it that way, you'll end up with some members of the team feeling like they were not part and parcel of the final decisions about what got communicated. And the last one I mentioned there is failing to give a heads up when there's an unexpected input. If you're doing some work and you get an answer from somewhere or input from somewhere that we're going to change the design basis, or something didn't test the way it was supposed to test, and that's going to influence the work of the team, you really need to be cognizant of giving that information to the other team members as soon as possible, and not holding that back, because that can influence everybody's work. How you communicate makes a difference. The effectiveness of communication depends not only on what you communicate, but how you communicate it. We obviously live in a world of multiple instantaneous methods of communication, so we have many choices. And the message that I'm trying to get across here is that it's important to choose the right method of communication for what you're trying to accomplish. And I also want to mention that you need to always think very clearly and carefully about who should be included in your communications. We all know, I certainly do, of embarrassing reply all incidents, for example, but I'm also aware of circumstances where people were excluded from communication when they should have been included. So thinking clearly about the distribution list, if you will, for any communication you make is important as well. I want to talk a little more about this slide. Mass communication techniques, when I say it, I'm talking about social media or email blasts or large meetings, for example. There are very efficient ways to communicate with large groups of people, but they may not be the most effective way, depending on the nature of the information in the communication. And I'm going to go through this slide to illustrate this point. I've tried to use color code here. The yellow on the left goes with the yellow on the right, for example. So I'll look at it that way. The first couple items there are sharing of non-controversial information, non-complex information, either to big groups or small groups of people, such as your team. In those cases, you look for the most efficient method of communication. And that can be email or social media or group meetings, text if the group of people is small enough to make it practical. So you're really just getting information out there. The next grouping on this page is really the green, blue, and yellow, those three items. And this is where you're sharing more controversial or complex information or trying to solve problems, either technical problems or schedule problems or that sort of thing, resolving routine work problems. In these cases, there's not sensitivity around the distribution of the information, but where there's a lot of interaction required to resolve a problem, a complex problem or a technical issue, it's better for those types of communication to either be done in person or phone or email or meeting. It's important in those cases for there to be two-way communication where you can work through things, discuss things. You'll get to solutions a lot quicker that way than using the email blast kind of approach on those things. You tend to get more high quality communication in the more personal situations like this, and you just simply can get better solutions and get them on the table quicker to resolve these kind of problems if you use the more personal type communications methods rather than the blast. Then the final two is at the bottom of the page, the bottom two items, the gray and the uncolored one. And this is where you're trying to solve problems, and it can be personal problems. Either you have an interpersonal problem with another team member or you're raising concerns about another team member's work. This needs to happen preferably in person. If you have to do it by phone, it's okay. This is not something to resolve with email or text. People tend to write things in an email that they would never say in person. You can damage a relationship and make it very difficult to repair. Plus, you don't have the benefit of getting the nonverbal communication clues from a person when you're talking to them about a sensitive issue. By nonverbal, I mean their reactions, what they have to say, and you can solve interpersonal problems and raise concerns, not damage a relationship, get to solutions much better if you handle those types of more delicate communications, preferably in person, but by phone if you have to. But it's not a good idea to try to resolve those kind of things by email or text, and certainly you don't want to try to resolve those things in a larger group where more people are involved. The comments about communication thus far have been centered really on teamwork related communications. This slide I threw in late. It's really addresses an aspect of communication skill which is not specifically tied to teamwork or team setting, but I do think it's important, so I wanted to cover it. One very important skill for an engineer, and one that can differentiate you from your competition for promotions and stuff, especially early on, is the ability to prepare high quality written communications. Your day-to-day communications with coworkers and your bosses, outside contacts, etc., will be informal in nature, text, email, social media, the way we normally communicate. But there will be relatively frequent times when you need to be able to prepare a more formal written communication. It might be an email, it might be a memo or a spreadsheet, it might be a PowerPoint presentation. But if you can do this and do it well, it'll definitely make a difference in your career. I've listed a few examples here of the types of written communications you may need to prepare. There are many, many others, but these are a few. There can be analyses and summaries of your work. You do a project and your work will be distributed and read by a broader audience. You'll make recommendations to fund projects you want to do as you go forward. You'll do post audits of your work and summaries of what lessons you learned from that work. You'll do budget reports, annual reports, business reviews, board meetings, and you'll do management presentations where you may get to present to the vice president or the president of the company. These are really important opportunities for you to be noticed and by people who will make decisions about your career. So your ability to do a quality job in those settings is really, really important. One other point I want to make about this is that these documents don't need to be long. In fact, the best written communication documents are shorter because people are more likely to read them carefully and read them all the way to the end. You'll be surprised how many people don't read all the way to the end. This might be counterintuitive to you, but it's a lot harder to do a quality short communication than it is to do a quality long communication. You really have to have a clear understanding of your work and your topic to be able to do a complete but short presentation. I'll give you a side story on this. When I was a senior at KU, Professor Jim Maloney, rest in peace, was our unit ops teacher and was an absolute fanatic about reports and report writing. He drove us all crazy with his nitpicking of our reports. We all complained about it, including me. But I learned very, very quickly that the skills he taught us there about writing reports and written communication were some of the most important things I learned at KU. And I thanked him for it many times over the years. So my bottom line on this one is use every opportunity you can to learn and develop this skill. You'll get some of it from your KU classes. If you need to supplement that with online learning or some other classes, I would encourage you to do that. I've found through my career that many new engineers don't have this skill when they start out. They have to learn them on the job. So if you have this skill on day one, it'll definitely give you a leg up and help in accelerating your career. And it's any extra effort you put in to develop these skills, I can almost guarantee you it'll pay off for you. I'm going to wrap up here with a couple of quotes from successful sports figures. I have to say I'm not a particular fan of either Michael Jordan or Tom Brady. I like Bill Self and Patrick Mahomes a lot better, but there is no questioning their success in their respective sports. And these quotes, in my view, succinctly sum up some of what I've been trying to tell you today. As Jordan says, talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence win championships. And Brady says, I just love working hard. I love being part of a team. I love working toward a common goal. My own experience is that working on teams is really fun and rewarding. I mentioned the relationships that I've built that I value greatly today. Being good at teamwork is not rocket science. It's common sense. It's treating people the way you would like to be treated. Really, it's the golden rule if you think about it that way. If you make the effort to be a good team player, it'll pay off for you in the long run. I feel that very strongly. And with that, I'm going to roll us into the Q&A session. As I stated earlier, any question on any topic is fine. I'll do my best to try to answer it. Dr. Parsons is going to collect the questions and serve as the moderator for this part. So I'm going to thank you for your attention. and time, rock chalk, and I'll throw it back to Dr. Parsons.
All right, thank you, Pat. So from here, a number of questions have come in. If you have more questions, keep them coming. We'll go through them. I expect to be on here with questions about 15, 20 minutes. That's kind of the plan going forward. So we're going to start off with what is the importance of having an established goal on a team, and I think perhaps maybe a clearly defined goal?
If we have to head out for our class, is that okay?
Sure, absolutely. If you guys need to go, absolutely, please drop off as you need to and check out the recording later. Okay. So,
would you rep the question one more time, Bob?
Yeah, the question was, what is the importance of having an established goal on a team?
I think it's very important. It can change, and that may be behind the question. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly on day one what that goal should be, but having one on day one and then adjusting it later as you learn more information is better than not having one. Having a common goal such that everyone is working toward the same thing is, I think, critical to the effectiveness of the team.
Do teams outlive their goals?
They can. There are teams that are kind of standing teams that deal with maybe relatively common issues over time. There are teams that are put together specifically to investigate a specific incident, and they'll be dissolved when they're completed. So it can go either way. But there are certainly teams, yes, that are standing teams, and they may have a new set of goals for a new specific problem when something else materializes.
Very good. Okay, this year has been a very difficult year for many businesses with coronavirus. How has Hawkwood dealt with 2020, and how has teamwork played a role?
It's a really good question, and yes, it's been difficult. Well, in our industry, not only was coronavirus tough, but we also saw our oil prices drop by about a half or so, and that's our direct revenue. So there was plenty of challenges all at once. We worked from home exclusively with our office staff from early March through June. We're now back to working. Our office staff is back in the office. Our field staff worked their normal schedules, but with new protocols in place to protect them. The field staff does a lot more individual work and out in the outside rather than an office environment, so it was easier for them. We cut our capital spending dramatically this year because of that drop in revenue to try to be able to pay the bills and keep things going. We always pay attention to our costs, but this year we've spent a lot less capital than what we normally do because of that. We actually have a board meeting tomorrow where we're going to look at adding back a small amount of that capital in the fourth quarter so we can start doing some more things.
Do you feel that, so as you had to deal with the social distancing and the Zoom and being distant from one another, did that impact teamwork, or were you able to work around that, you feel?
I think we were able to work around it. We'd had some people already working in that in a remote environment, so we had a little bit of experience with it. I think one of the things that we, I'm going to say encouraged, but required is probably a better word, was that once we went to working from home, that we had all of our sub-teams, all of our work teams meet by Zoom at least once a week. And the idea there was we didn't want people to lose connectivity with one another when they weren't seeing each other routinely on a day-to-day basis. So each team, and some of them were doing it twice a week, but would make a point of having a Zoom session where everyone was participating, and it was more about staying in touch and dealing with the issues that needed to be dealt with, but really keeping that connection going. And also at that point, I was still serving as CEO. I made an effort to proactively communicate with our people a couple times a week. I was sending out an update email, which I wouldn't normally do to everybody in the company, but I was, because there was a lot of uncertainty about what was happening and how we were going to handle it. And I felt like there was a real hunger in the organization for knowing what was going on. So I took that extra step of producing those emails twice a week to really just keep people up to speed with what was going on. And I got quite a little favorable feedback from our employees about that.
Very good. Couple of questions on from students on what would be good for them to do now. So what is the best piece of advice for freshman engineering students at KU? And what sort of current opportunities would you encourage students to engage in that would help them develop their teamwork skills?
Well, good question. I'm assuming that there will be team kind of projects in at least some of the classes at KU. There certainly were when I went. Bob or others can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but likely there will be those opportunities, and so those are a good foundling way to start learning those teamwork skills. As a freshman at KU, a really important aspect of getting a job, whether it's particularly now in a tough economic climate, hopefully it'll be better in 3 or 4 years when freshman graduates, but it's all about networking. If you have the opportunity to get to know people in companies, if you have friends that work for companies that you're interested in, or your parents are connected to companies, and you can start to shadow somebody for a day or two, or start to build some degree of relationship with any of these companies that you'd consider. It's never too early to do that. Those things can be really important to finding work, especially in a tough environment, tough and economic environment like there is right now. When you work with your fellow colleagues, you're doing homework together, or even if it's not a formally assigned project, I think some of these teamwork principles that I've talked about can still be applied, and you can start working to try to use some of those as you go along.
All right, a couple of questions on team personality or conflict type issues within a team. How do you address issues that develop as a team leader, how do you address issues that develop when individuals with different personalities start to conflict?
That's a tough one. My personal approach is, first of all, if I see that, I talk to each of the individuals first, individually, to hear what they have to say, what their perspective on the issue is. What's the problem? Why is the problem there? What could be done about it? If I can hear enough common ground among the two of them to then sit down with the two of them and go and discuss this and try to develop some action plan to improve it, that's what I would do. If there's an untenable break in a relationship between two people, it's for whatever reason, and I can't see a path to trying to bring that together, then either one or both of the people have to be off the team. You can't let that fester on a team. It impairs the performance of the team. You have to replace somebody if it's irreparable, but I wouldn't get to the conclusion that it was irreparable without doing some more homework before I got to that point.
Okay. What do you do when you're a team member and you think the team is making the wrong decision or is going in the wrong direction?
Good question too, and that's a really important one. I think you probably the first thing I would do if I was in that situation is discuss with the team leader and raise my concerns, and not make it personal, but express my opinion about why I feel that way and what's caused me to feel that way, and then see what kind of reaction I get from the team lead. And then, if the team lead is, sometimes if you're in the team lead and you hear that, you may already be thinking it as the team lead, but hearing it from somebody else that's also seeing it will get you off dead center to start dealing with the rest of the team. If the team lead is skeptical that that there's really an issue, then you've got some more work to do. But I think my first step would be to sit with the team leader and explain my perspective on it, and then go from there based on how he or she, the team lead, reacts to that.
Okay. This question, you're also a team member. It's good to communicate effectively, but how do you keep a balance of your personal and work life when it comes to sharing something that is bothering you and might affect your performance, while at the same time being a professional? So I gather you want to be a professional, but you've got a personal issue going on in your life. How do you bring that to the team?
Yeah, that's tough. That's a place where if I was in that circumstance, I would be. I would hope that I would have one or two people on the team that were my closest friends on the team. I was talking about this earlier, having backup. I would probably go to those people first. I'm kind of a private person, rather than just exposing my problem to everybody. I would go to the people that one or two people that I most trusted, explain the situation to them. Maybe they can help me through it. But if not, then I have to go to the team lead and seek his or her help and determine whether this is a situation that the team can work through, or whether I need to be reassigned.
Very good. How do you adjust as a team leader? How do you adjust and adapt when rotating team members? What do you suggest for bringing new teammates up to speed?
Good question too. I think one of the things I do is the person rotating off, part of their responsibility is to onboard the person coming in to take their place. If a person's leaving for some crisis, that may not be practical, but if it's just a rotation, then in most of the time that I've been through this, the individual that's rotating off will take the responsibility and want to bring their work to an orderly conclusion on the team, and they'll take the effort to help onboard the team member that's coming in to take their place. It's also incumbent on the team leader to ensure that to get involved directly and ensure that this rotation takes place smoothly, that the new person fully understands their responsibilities and what the loose ends are, and get started. So I think it's a dual responsibility of the team lead and the outgoing team member to help onboard that new person.
All right. How do you deal with accountability of your teams? Sometimes budgets, schedules, or quality get challenging with teamwork.
Well, good question. You have to keep the common goal in mind, first of all, and the common goal is what you want to accomplish, and how many dollars you have to accomplish it, and how much time you have to accomplish it. All the things I talked about in terms of how the team should function are intended to facilitate achieving those things, not slow those things down. But if the team is getting balled up, for lack of a better word, in not being able to accomplish its task due to too much consensus or too much communication or whatever, then I think the team needs to rethink about how they're going to accomplish their goal. I mean, maybe it's a reset of the team goals. Maybe it's a realization that some of the techniques being used to accomplish those goals are not working the way they should. I guess I would say it's incumbent upon the team lead to set the team down, review the situation that's materializing, and figure out how the team needs to adjust to be able to meet its targets. because the things that I've talked about here today about how teams should work, as I said, the reasons for doing these things are to get the team to work more effectively. If it's going the other way, then the methods need to be adjusted.
Mm-hmm. All right, one more question, unless somebody has one they want to send in. But you mentioned a number of projects from around the world. Presumably you lived there, at least for a short period of time. And the question is, so what did you learn from working internationally? What were your favorite places? Would you recommend working internationally?
First of all, I definitely would recommend it. I and my family lived in all those places. My kids my daughter went to preschool in Singapore, went to elementary school in Egypt. My son went to preschool in Egypt as well. My favorite places were Singapore and Qatar. I think I did it early in my career, relatively early in my career. When my kids got to high school age, we made a family decision that we wanted to be in North America. My daughter actually went to high school in Calgary, Alberta, and my son went to high school in Houston. But when they were younger and more able to move around, we decided to use that time to work internationally. Getting a taste for how other people live, I found to be extremely rewarding. I think I enjoyed it. We went in with the mindset that we were going to be part of the community there. I've seen people in expatriate situations where they really want the world to be exactly like it was back in the U.S., and they can be unhappy because you're living in a different place, a different culture. We took the approach of, we're going here, we're going to be part of this culture, we're going to get the most out of it. And so we found it very rewarding. I think my kids have a broader worldview as a result. I think it's been beneficial to them. It was a pain in the neck to move them from one school to the next. I know that, but they always adapted, and I think it ultimately proved to be good for them. Certainly makes me appreciate the quality of life we have in the U.S. When I hear people sometimes complaining about things being the way they are in the U.S., I think back to some of the things I've seen in places I've lived, and it gives you perspective, that I can say for sure. So at least from my point of view, and I think my family, my wife and my two kids would both say the same thing, it was definitely a positive experience for us, and I think all of us would do it again.
Great. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining. Thank you, Pat, for the wonderful presentation and the question and answer session. We would all applaud if we were in the same room. So I'm sure at this point, but anyway, thank you everybody for attending, and encourage your friends to join in next time or to watch the recording or both. And with that, thank you everyone for coming. Have a great evening. And thank you again, Pat.
Thank you. I appreciate it.